The first thing my sister did on my wedding day was laugh at my dress. Not a nervous laugh, not an awkward one. A sharp, deliberate sound, like she wanted everyone in the room to hear it. "Oh my God," she said, folding her arms as she leaned against the doorway of the bridal suite. "You're actually wearing that?" The room went quiet. My bridesmaids froze mid-motion. The makeup artist stopped blending. My mother sucked in a breath, like she already knew where this was going, and had decided not to stop it. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The dress wasn't extravagant. No dramatic train. No glitter that screamed for attention. It was simple, clean, elegant. It was me. "I love it," I said softly. My sister rolled her eyes. "Of course you do. You've always liked modest." The way she said it made it sound like a flaw. My sister, Alina, had always been like this. Loud where I was quiet, bold where I was careful, admired where I was tolerated. Growing up, she was the one people noticed first. Teachers, friends, strangers in grocery stores. I was the one they noticed later, if at all. And Alina never let me forget that. When I got engaged, she laughed then too. "To him?" she asked, incredulous. "Seriously?" My fiancé, Daniel, had just smiled politely and offered her a handshake, calm, reserved, almost invisible beside her energy. She didn't even take his hand. "So what does he do again?" she asked me, not him. "He works in consulting," I replied. She snorted. "That's vague. Is that code for unemployed?" Daniel didn't react. I did. "He's very successful," I said quietly. Alina shrugged. "If you say so." That was the moment I should have known she wouldn't behave on my wedding day. But hope makes you stupid. Back in the bridal suite, she circled me slowly like a critic inspecting a flawed painting. "No veil?" she asked. I didn't want one. "Figures," she muttered, "always allergic to tradition." I swallowed. "Alina," my maid of honor said carefully, "maybe now isn't—" "Oh, relax," my sister cut in. "I'm just being honest." Honest. That word had been her shield my entire life. She could say anything, hurtful, cruel, humiliating, and if you objected, you were too sensitive. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You know," she said, "it's kind of sad." I met her eyes in the mirror. "What is?" "This whole thing," she replied. "I mean, I always pictured my wedding first, something big, something impressive." She gestured vaguely at the room. "And then there's this." Pathetic. She didn't say the word yet, but it hung there, waiting. The ceremony started on time. I walked down the aisle with my father, heart pounding, trying to focus on Daniel standing at the altar. He looked calm, grounded, steady, everything I wasn't. When our eyes met, I felt myself breathe again. For a moment, nothing else mattered. Not Alina, not the whispers, not the tension. Just us. The vows were beautiful, simple, honest. Daniel's voice never shook. Mine did, but not because I was unsure, because I'd never felt more certain of anything in my life. When he slid the ring onto my finger, I heard someone scoff. I didn't have to look to know who it was. The reception was where everything fell apart. It started small. Alina arrived late, fashionably she'd call it, wearing a dress so white it could have passed for a second wedding gown. I saw my mother notice, saw her hesitate, say nothing. That was the story of my childhood in one glance. During dinner, Alina drank too much, or maybe she'd planned it that way. She laughed too loudly, interrupted speeches, corrected people mid-sentence. When Daniel's best man spoke about how grounded and generous Daniel was, Alina leaned over to the table next to her and whispered loudly, "Grounded? That's one word for boring." People heard. They laughed awkwardly. I clenched my napkin so hard my fingers hurt. Then came the speeches. My sister stood up uninvited. She grabbed the microphone before the DJ could stop her.
"Oh, come on," she laughed. "I'm the sister. I have to say something." The room stilled. Daniel turned slightly toward me. "Do you want me to?" I shook my head. I didn't want a scene.
I didn't want to give her the satisfaction. Alina tapped the microphone. "So," she began, swaying slightly, "I guess this is the part where I say how happy I am for my little sister." A few polite smiles appeared. She looked at me, then laughed. "But honestly," she continued, "I'm just surprised." The smiles faded. Surprised she actually found someone willing to marry her. Gasps rippled through the room. I felt my face burn. "She was always the quiet one," Alina went on. "The one who needed help, needed reassurance, needed someone to tell her she was enough." She shrugged. "I guess desperation works eventually." My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I looked at Daniel. He hadn't moved. Not angry, not embarrassed, just watching her, like he was waiting. "And let's be real," Alina said, leaning into the mic. "This whole wedding is kind of sad." She smiled at the crowd. "No offense, sis, but this," she gestured around the room, "this is what happens when you aim low." Then she turned directly to me. "You've always been pathetic." The word landed like a slap. The room exploded into chaos. My mother stood up, horrified. My father shouted her name. Someone tried to take the microphone. Alina laughed, triumphant. And through it all, Daniel stayed silent. Until he wasn't. He stepped forward, calmly, took the microphone from her hand. The room went dead silent. Alina smirked. "Oh, are you finally going to say something?" Daniel looked at her, not with anger, with clarity. "You're right about one thing," he said evenly. She raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" "This wedding isn't about impressing people like you." Murmurs spread. He turned slightly, placing a hand over mine. "It's about choosing the right life partner. And I did." Alina scoffed. "Please, you act like you're some prize." Daniel smiled. Not arrogantly, knowingly. "I don't," he said, "but I know exactly who I am." Then he looked around the room, and since tonight seems to be about honesty, I felt his hand tighten gently around mine. "There's something you should all know." Alina laughed again. "Oh, this should be good." She had no idea at all. Because in that moment, standing in front of everyone, my sister still thought she was in control. She still thought my husband was nobody, and she had absolutely no clue who she'd just humiliated. The silence after Daniel spoke was so complete it felt staged, like the room itself was holding its breath. My sister, still gripping the edge of the table, still flushed from alcohol and adrenaline, tilted her head and smiled like she'd just been invited to a show. "Oh," she said lightly, "by all means, please, enlighten us." Daniel didn't rush. That alone unsettled her. He adjusted the microphone not because he needed to, but because he owned the moment now. Every eye in the room followed him, waiting. Even the clinking of glasses had stopped. I felt his thumb brush the back of my hand, grounding. Steady. "You've spent the entire evening telling everyone what this wedding isn't, what my wife isn't, what I'm not." He paused, letting the word wife settle in. "And that's fine," he continued. "People reveal a lot about themselves when they speak freely." Alina rolled her eyes. "Are we done with the motivational speech yet?" A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Daniel didn't look at her right away. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw something I'd seen 1,000 times in private, but never in public. Resolve. "I met your sister 3 years ago," Daniel said, turning back to the room. "She was working 2 jobs, helping her parents, and still somehow apologizing for taking up space." My throat tightened. She didn't think she was impressive. She didn't think she was enough. And that wasn't because she lacked anything. His gaze flicked briefly to Alina. It was because she'd been told her entire life that confidence belonged to someone else. Alina laughed sharply. "Oh, please, you're blaming me for her issues now?" "No," Daniel replied evenly. "I'm saying you benefited from them." The silence went still again. That wasn't an insult. That was an observation, and it hit harder. Alina's smile twitched. "You don't know anything about our family. I know exactly what you showed me tonight, and I know something else." He turned slightly, addressing the guests.
"I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came here to marry the woman I love." He looked back at Alina. "But if you insist on honesty, if you insist on measuring worth publicly, then it's only fair that the scale be accurate." A murmur spread. My mother's face had gone pale. My father looked like he wanted to disappear under the table. Daniel took a breath. "For those of you who don't know me well," he said, "I tend to avoid talking about work at social events." Alina scoffed. "Shocking." Daniel smiled faintly. "Not because I'm ashamed," he continued, "but because I prefer not to reduce people or myself to job titles." He paused. "But since it's been brought up so many times," Alina crossed her arms. "Oh my God, is this where you tell us you're secretly a millionaire?" A few nervous laughs. Daniel didn't take the bait. "I'm a senior partner at a private consulting firm," he said. "We specialize in corporate restructuring, acquisitions, and risk assessment." The tone of the room shifted, not dramatically, but perceptibly. A few heads lifted, a few brows furrowed. Alina waved her hand dismissively. "That still doesn't mean anything. Everyone's a consultant these days." Daniel nodded. "True, titles can be misleading." Then he added, almost casually, "That's why most of my clients don't know my name until after the deal closes." That landed differently. A man at the far end of the room, one of Daniel's colleagues, shifted in his seat. Another guest leaned toward their partner and whispered something urgent. Alina noticed. Her smile faltered for half a second. "What's that supposed to mean?" she demanded. "It means," Daniel said gently, "that discretion is part of my job." He looked at the crowd again. "And part of my life." Then, finally, he looked back at her. "But since tonight seems to require transparency," he reached into his jacket pocket. My heart jumped. I hadn't known he was planning this. Neither had anyone else. Daniel pulled out his phone, not to show pictures, not to scroll. He tapped once, then handed it, not to Alina, but to the man seated at the table closest to the stage. "Would you mind?" Daniel asked politely.
The man blinked, startled, then looked at the screen. His eyes widened. He looked up at Daniel, then at Alina, then back at the screen. "You're—" he started. Daniel held up a hand. "Please," he said, "just read the headline." The man swallowed, read, and went very still. The tension in the room became unbearable. Alina snapped. "What is this? Some kind of trick?" Daniel took the phone back and turned it outward, not toward the whole room, just enough. "I don't enjoy public displays," he said, "but I won't allow my wife to be insulted in front of people she loves." He looked at Alina. "You called her pathetic." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You should understand what that word means." Alina laughed again, but this time it sounded brittle. "Okay," she said, "so you're successful. Congratulations. That doesn't change anything." Daniel tilted his head. "It changes one thing," he said. "Your assumptions." She sneered. "About what?" "About power," he replied. The room felt like it was leaning forward. "You see," Daniel continued, "you've spent the entire evening trying to establish hierarchy." He gestured lightly. Who's impressive? Who's worthy? Who should be admired? He stepped closer to her, not aggressively, but deliberately. And the problem with that game is this. He stopped, looked her in the eye. You never bothered to check the board. For the first time that night, Alina didn't have a comeback ready. Her eyes darted around the room. People weren't laughing anymore. They weren't nodding. They were watching, evaluating, reassessing. My mother stood up abruptly. Daniel, please, this isn't necessary. He turned to her kindly. I agree, it never was. Then he looked back at Alina.
But it became necessary when your daughter decided to humiliate my wife on her wedding day. The word wife, again. Each time he said it, it felt like armor forming around me. Alina's face flushed deep red. You think this makes you better than me? She snapped. No, Daniel said. I think it makes you angry. She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. You're just trying to intimidate me. Daniel smiled, not cruelly, knowingly. No, he said, I'm setting a boundary. He handed the microphone back to the DJ. This conversation is over. For a moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, applause started. Not roaring, not celebratory, measured, respectful. People weren't clapping at Alina, they were clapping for the end of it. Alina stood there, shaking. You think you've won? She hissed. Daniel didn't respond. He turned to me. Are you okay? He asked softly. I nodded, tears blurring my vision. Yes, I whispered. I am. He kissed my forehead, then took my hand, and together we walked off the stage. Behind us, the room erupted into whispers. Phones came out. Names were searched. Connections were made. Alina stood alone in the center of it all, no longer the loudest voice, no longer the one in control. She still didn't fully understand who my husband was, but she was starting to understand what he wasn't. He wasn't weak, he wasn't invisible, and he wasn't someone she could talk down to. Later that night, in a quiet hallway away from the reception, Daniel leaned against the wall and exhaled. I'm sorry, he said. For what? I asked. For waiting, he replied. I wanted you to lead tonight, but I couldn't let that stand. I squeezed his hand. You didn't ruin my wedding, I said. You saved it. He smiled. That was always the plan. We didn't know then what would happen next. We didn't know how far the fallout would spread. We didn't know who Alina would call or what she would say once the shock wore off. But one thing was certain. The balance had shifted, and the person my sister had dismissed as nobody, he had just rewritten the entire room without raising his voice. The reception didn't end after Daniel took my hand and led me away from the stage. It paused, like the room itself was recalibrating, trying to figure out which version of reality it was supposed to continue in. Behind us, music resumed awkwardly, glasses clinked. People pretended to sit back down and resume conversations, but nothing sounded the same anymore. Every laugh was half a beat late, every smile looked rehearsed, and my sister? She stayed exactly where we left her. I didn't see it at first. I was too focused on my own heartbeat, the way Daniel's hand felt steady and warm in mine, the way my chest rose and fell like I'd just come up from underwater. But later, much later, someone showed me a photo. Alina standing alone in the center of the dance floor, arms crossed, chin lifted, eyes darting, like a general who'd just realized the battlefield had shifted. We retreated to a small lounge near the back of the venue. The wedding coordinator hovered nervously, unsure whether to apologize or congratulate us. I can ask her to leave, she whispered. Daniel looked at me. I shook my head. No, I said. Let her stay. He searched my face. Are you sure? I nodded. She wanted an audience, I said quietly.
Now she has one. People started coming to us, not all at once, in ones and twos. Friends, colleagues, distant relatives. Each interaction felt different than anything I'd experienced before. Not pity, not politeness, respect. "I'm so sorry that happened," one guest said softly. "You handled that with such grace," another added. "I had no idea," someone else murmured, glancing back toward the main room. I smiled, thanked them. But inside, something deeper was happening. For the first time in my life, no one was asking me to minimize what I felt. No one was telling me it wasn't that bad. They'd seen it, all of it. My parents finally came in together. My mother's eyes were red. My father looked older. "I should have stopped her," my mother said immediately. The words sounded rehearsed. I nodded. "Yes, you should have." She flinched. "I didn't think she'd go that far," my father added. I looked at him. "She always does," I said calmly. "She just usually does it to me in private." Silence. That one landed. My mother clasped her hands together. "Can we talk about this later?" I shook my head gently. "No," I said. "Tonight is later." Her eyes widened. "I'm not angry," I continued. "I'm just done pretending this is new." Daniel stayed quiet beside me, present, unmoving, exactly what I needed. Out in the reception hall, Alina tried to recover. I saw it happen from across the room. She laughed loudly with a group of people who didn't quite laugh back. She gestured too much, drank too fast. She tried to reclaim the energy. It didn't work. Because something had changed. People were watching her now, not admiringly, not indulgently, but cautiously, re-evaluating. Then she started telling her version. I didn't need to hear the words to know the shape of it. It was just a joke. She didn't mean it like that. Everyone was too sensitive. Daniel overreacted. I'd always been dramatic. I'd heard these lines my entire life. The difference now? They weren't landing. One of Daniel's colleagues approached me later in the evening. He said, "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but your sister made a mistake tonight." I raised an eyebrow slightly. He smiled. "She assumed power was loud." I felt a small, unexpected laugh escape me. "She's always made that mistake," I said. He nodded. "People like your husband tend to benefit from that assumption." At some point, Alina approached us. I felt it before I saw her, that familiar tightening in my stomach, the sense of bracing. Daniel felt it too. His hand tightened around mine, just slightly. She stopped a few feet away. Her mascara had smudged. Her confidence hadn't, but it had cracks now. "So," she said, arms folded, "I guess congratulations are in order." "Thank you," I replied. The word came out steady. It surprised me. She looked at Daniel, then back at me. "You really married him," she said, like she was still trying to process it. I smiled faintly. "Yes." She scoffed. "You always liked playing safe." Daniel spoke before I could. "There's nothing safe about choosing integrity," he said. She rolled her eyes. "Please, you embarrassed me in front of everyone." I tilted my head. "You embarrassed yourself." Her eyes flashed. "You think you've won?" she snapped. I shook my head. "This isn't a competition," I said. "It's just the end of pretending." That seemed to throw her more than any insult could have. She turned to Daniel. "You think you're better than us?" she demanded. Daniel met her gaze calmly. "No," he said. "I think you don't know how to be kind without being in control." Her mouth opened, closed. She hadn't expected that. "Well," she said stiffly, "enjoy your little fantasy." She turned on her heel and walked away. This time, no one followed her. The rest of the night unfolded gently. Dancing resumed, laughter became real again. Music filled the spaces that tension had occupied. Daniel and I danced. slowly, carefully, like two people who just crossed something fragile together. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. Then paused. "No," I admitted, "but I will be." He smiled. "That's all that matters." Later, alone in the hotel room, I finally cried. Not loud, not dramatically, just tears slipping quietly down my cheeks as the adrenaline wore off. "I'm sorry she did that to you," Daniel said, sitting beside me. I shook my head. "She's been doing it my whole life," I said. "This is just the first time someone stopped her." He pulled me into his chest. "You're not pathetic," he said firmly. "You never were." I let myself believe him. The next morning, the fallout began. Texts, calls, messages from relatives who'd witnessed the night from different angles. Some apologized, some defended Alina, some asked me to be the bigger person. I read them all, responded to none. Because something inside me had finally shifted. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to justify. I didn't need to absorb the discomfort of others to keep the peace. The peace had already been broken. By her. Alina sent one message, just one. "You let him humiliate me." I stared at it for a long time, then typed back, "You humiliated me first. He just didn't let it stand." She never replied. What she still didn't fully understand, what she wouldn't understand for a long time, was that Daniel's power had never been the point. His job, his influence, his reputation, those were just facts. What mattered was that he saw me, believed me, and chose me loudly when I'd spent a lifetime being told to stay small. My wedding wasn't ruined. It was clarified, stripped of illusions. It showed me exactly who my family was willing to protect and who they weren't. And it showed me exactly who my husband was. My sister had called me pathetic. But the truth? Pathetic would have been staying silent. And that night, for the first time in my life, I didn't. The morning after the wedding felt heavier than the night itself, not because of regret, because of clarity. I woke up before Daniel did, sunlight filtering through the hotel curtains in pale strips. My body felt tired in that deep, emotional way, like I'd run a marathon without moving. I lay there quietly, listening to his breathing, replaying the night in pieces I hadn't let myself feel yet. The laughter that stopped too abruptly, the silence when Alina said pathetic, the way the room shifted when Daniel spoke, not loudly, not angrily, but with certainty. And underneath all of it, the realization that this hadn't started at my wedding. It had ended there. Daniel stirred beside me. "You okay?" he murmured, half asleep. I nodded, then shook my head, then laughed softly. "I don't know yet," I admitted. He smiled gently. "That's fair." We didn't rush the morning. No alarms, no schedules. Just coffee, quiet, and the slow realization that we were married now. Not just legally, but in the sense that mattered most. We'd faced something together on day one, and we hadn't flinched. By mid-morning, the messages started again. Family group chats, private texts, voicemails left with voices that tried to sound reasonable. Everyone had an opinion, and most of them were about me. You didn't have to let it get that far. She was drunk, you know how she gets. Daniel should have stayed out of it. Can't you just move on? It's over now. Over. Like something that had been happening for decades could be wrapped up in one uncomfortable evening and labeled finished. I read them all. Then I turned my phone face down. Daniel watched me quietly. "You don't have to respond," he said. "I know," I replied. "What do you want to do?" That question, simple, open, still felt new to me. "I want to go home. Home. Not my parents' house, not the venue, our place." When we arrived back, the silence felt different than before, safer. I slipped out of my heels, kicked them aside, and sat on the couch, dress pooled around me like I'd finally stopped performing.
Daniel joined me, draping an arm around my shoulders. "You know," he said lightly, "this isn't how most people spend their first day married." I smiled. "No, but it's honest." He kissed my temple. "That's kind of our thing." The next few days were strange. The world moved on, but my family didn't. My parents came over unannounced on the third day. I almost didn't open the door, but I did. They looked tired. My mother clutched her purse like a shield. My father stood a step behind her, hands shoved into his pockets. "We need to talk," my mother said. I stepped aside. Daniel stayed in the room, but didn't insert himself. That mattered. My mother sat down first. "I never wanted things to happen like that," she said. "I know." She hesitated. "She didn't mean it." I met her eyes. "She did," I said calmly. "She always does." My father cleared his throat. "She was wrong. We told her that." "When?" I asked. He didn't answer. My mother reached for my hand. I let her, but didn't squeeze back. "She's hurting," she said. "So am I," I replied. The room went quiet. "You've always been the understanding one," she added softly. There it was, the expectation, the role. I gently withdrew my hand. "I'm done being that at my own expense," I said. She flinched. My father finally spoke. "What do you want us to do?" he asked. It was the first time anyone had asked me that without already having an answer in mind. I thought about it, really thought. "I want accountability," I said. "Not excuses, not silence, not asking me to be bigger." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "You're asking us to choose," she whispered.
"No," I said gently. "I'm asking you to stop choosing for me." They left shortly after. Not angry, not resolved, but changed. Alina didn't reach out again that week, but her presence was felt anyway, through messages passed along, through people checking in, through stories being retold with details softened or sharpened depending on who was listening. Daniel watched it all with quiet patience. "She's trying to regain control of the narrative," he said one evening. "I know," I replied. "You don't have to engage." "I'm not," I said. "For once, I'm letting the truth speak for itself." A week later, my aunt called. "I just wanted you to know," she said carefully, "not everyone thought what she did was okay." I smiled faintly. "I appreciate that." "She's embarrassed," my aunt added. I exhaled slowly. "She should be." That was all I said. The shift wasn't immediate, but it was real. People stopped asking me to apologize, stopped asking Daniel to smooth things over, stopped assuming I'd fold. Because I didn't. One night, Daniel and I talked about it honestly for the first time. "What happens if this never goes back to normal?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Then we build something better." I leaned into him. "You're not angry?" "At her?" he asked. "No." "Why not?" He smiled slightly. "Because anger would mean she still has influence. She doesn't." That settled something deep in my chest. I realized then that Daniel hadn't humiliated my sister, he'd exposed her, and there's a difference. Humiliation is loud and temporary. Exposure is quiet and permanent. A month later, we attended a family gathering. Small, tense. Alina was there.
She avoided me, avoided Daniel completely. She laughed a little too hard, spoke a little too fast, but she didn't cross the line, not once, because now she knew where it was. At one point, she caught my eye across the room. For the first time in my life, she looked uncertain, not superior, not mocking, just unsure. I held her gaze, didn't smile, didn't scowl, just stood there, unmoved. She looked away. Later that night, Daniel squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said, and meant it. because something had finally broken. Not me, the pattern. My sister ruined my wedding. That part was true. But what she didn't know, what she could never have known, was that in trying to humiliate me, she'd done something else entirely. She'd forced the truth into the open. She'd shown everyone who she was. And she'd revealed exactly who my husband was, too. Not because of his job, not because of his influence, but because when it mattered most, he chose me. Publicly, unapologetically, without hesitation. And once you've been chosen like that, you don't go back to shrinking. Ever. The strangest part wasn't that my sister stopped attacking me, it was that she stopped being able to. For most of my life, Alina's power came from one simple thing: everyone else's silence. She said cruel things because no one corrected her. She crossed lines because no one pushed back. She dominated rooms because people adjusted around her, and I had been the easiest to adjust, until I wasn't. After the wedding, weeks passed without another explosion. No dramatic apology, no screaming match, no family intervention where I was asked to understand her side. Instead, something quieter happened. People started treating me differently. Not delicately, not with pity, with respect. It showed up in small ways. A cousin pulled me aside at a gathering and said, "I always wondered why she talked to you like that." An aunt admitted, "I should have said something years ago." Even my father, one evening when it was just the two of us, said quietly, "I failed you by letting that become normal." He didn't elaborate, he didn't defend himself, he just said it, and for the first time, that was enough. Alina noticed the shift. Of course she did. She'd always been sensitive to changes in attention, where it flowed, where it stopped. She tested the waters once. It happened at a family dinner about 6 weeks after the wedding. She made a comment, sharp, familiar, about how I'd changed since marrying into money. The table went still. I didn't respond. Daniel didn't either. Before either of us could, my mother spoke. "That's not appropriate," she said flatly. Alina blinked. "What?" she laughed. "I'm joking." "No, you're not." Silence. Not awkward. Corrective. Alina's mouth opened. Closed. She laughed again, but it sounded hollow, and she didn't try again. Later that night, she cornered me in the kitchen. Not aggressively, carefully. "You really enjoy this, don't you?" she said. I met her eyes. "Enjoy what?" she snapped. "Being protected, being untouchable." I shook my head. "I enjoy being respected," I said. "There's a difference." Her jaw tightened. "You think you're better than me now," she said. I answered honestly. "No," I said. "I think I'm done competing with you." That stopped her, because competition had always been her language, and I had just refused to speak it. She scoffed and walked away, but she didn't look victorious. She looked unsettled. That night, Daniel and I talked about it in bed. "She's not used to boundaries," I said. "She's used to people moving," he replied. I smiled softly. I stopped. He kissed my forehead. "That's why this feels different." Months passed. Life normalized, not in the sense that everything became perfect, but in the way that matters. We settled into marriage, built routines, argued about small things, planned trips, talked about the future in quiet, hopeful ways. And through it all, something stayed steady. I didn't shrink. Not at family dinners, not in conversations, not when Alina was in the room. I wasn't loud, I wasn't confrontational, I was simply unmoved. That turned out to be the most powerful thing of all. The final confrontation, if you could even call it that, came unexpectedly. Alina showed up at my door one afternoon, alone. No warning, no audience. She looked tired. Not dramatic tired, defeated tired. "I just want to talk," she said. Daniel looked at me. I nodded.
He went into the other room. She stood in the doorway awkwardly, like she didn't know where to place herself without dominance to guide her. "You really embarrassed me," she said finally. I didn't argue. "I know," I replied. She frowned. "You don't care?" I considered it. "I care that you hurt me for years," I said. "I don't care that people saw it." Her eyes flicked up. "That wasn't my intention," she said automatically. I met her gaze.
Yes, it was. She swallowed. "You think you're special now," she said quietly. I shook my head. "I think I always was," I said. "I just believed you when you told me I wasn't." That cracked something in her. Her eyes filled with tears, not performative, not loud, confused. "I don't know how to talk to you anymore," she whispered. I felt something soften, but not weaken. "Then don't," I said gently. "Learn." She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. Then she nodded once and left. She didn't apologize, not fully, not the way movies promise, but she didn't attack again either. And sometimes growth looks like silence where cruelty used to be. Later that night, I told Daniel everything. He listened quietly. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes," I said, "because I finally understand something." "What's that?" "She didn't ruin my wedding," I said. "She ended a story that was already rotting." He smiled. "I was hoping you'd see that." Looking back now, I understand why that day had to happen exactly the way it did. If Alina hadn't gone that far, if she hadn't said pathetic out loud, if she hadn't tried to humiliate me publicly, the pattern might have continued forever. Quiet, polite, invisible. But she miscalculated. She assumed I'd stay silent. She assumed my husband would too. She assumed power was loud. She didn't know who my husband really was, not because of his job, not because of his influence, not because of the deals he'd closed or the people who respected him. She didn't know that he was the kind of man who listens first, who watches patterns, who steps in only when silence becomes harm. She didn't know that he would never confuse kindness with weakness, and she didn't know that by marrying him, I wasn't gaining status. I was gaining safety.
The kind of safety that lets you stand tall without shouting. The kind that doesn't need to dominate a room. The kind that chooses you even when it's inconvenient, especially then. My sister called me pathetic. What she didn't know was that I had already stopped believing her. She didn't ruin my wedding. She revealed herself. And in doing so, she showed me exactly who I was and exactly who I had chosen to stand beside me for the rest of my life. And once that truth is spoken out loud, no one ever gets to rewrite it again.